The medbay aboard the Oloran peacekeeper vessel shimmered with sterile light, its walls pulsating gently to the rhythm of the ship's artificial gravity. A dozen alien medics gracefully elongated, their skin a translucent hue that revealed faintly glowing circulatory systems clustered nervously around the containment pod. Inside it lay a creature that exuded raw menace, its colossal frame sprawled in uneasy slumber. The creature resembled a terrestrial bear, but with additional rows of articulated claws on its forelimbs and iridescent fur that rippled hypnotically in the light. Its jaws were packed with serrated teeth, capable of pulverizing bone, and its nostrils flared even in unconsciousness, detecting scents unseen. Dr. Krethal, the lead medic, held his surgical implements with trembling appendages. This is madness. Treating a Yolkrin? Apex predators do not belong in medical facilities, they belong in reinforced cells or the void. We cannot allow it to suffer, insisted Dalen, the junior medic. It wandered into peacekeeper territory. If we show compassion, it could open a dialogue with the Oran tribes. Dr. Krethal huffed. Compassion is one thing. Being eaten alive because our anesthetics don't work is another. Just as the tension reached its peak, a new voice entered the fray. Why all look like you've seen a ghost? All eyes turned to the man in the doorway. He was human, clad in a faded utility jumpsuit that bore grease stains and the faint smell of disinfectant. Dr. Alan Carter adjusted his round glasses and surveyed the room with a curious mix of bemusement and determination. You're the expert they sent, Krethal's voice cracked, his disbelief palpable. Veterinarian Carter clarified, stepping forward. Specialized in large predators. I hear you've got a big one in need of patching up. Krethal's translucent skin flushed a deeper shade of lavender. This isn't a terrestrial animal. It's a Yolkrin, a Class S predator capable of dismantling entire peacekeeper squads. Great Carter said, unfazed. He dropped a duffel bag onto the nearest table with a heavy thunk. Let's get to work. The alien medics exchanged looks of incredulity. Dalen stepped closer, his bioluminescent veins pulsing rapidly. You truly think you can treat this creature? Carter shrugged. Big teeth, sharp claws, bad attitude? Yeah, I've seen worse. Ever tried to tranquilize a Bengal tiger while dangling from a tree limb? Krethal sputtered. This is not a matter of tranquilization. Its physiology is. Relax, Carter interrupted, pulling out an assortment of syringes, clamps, and instruments that looked better suited for a mechanic's toolbox than a medbay. You've got scans of this guy, right? Show me the problem. Dalen hesitated, then tapped a panel. The hologram of the Yolkrin's internal anatomy hovered in the air, rotating slowly. Its thick bones, heavily armored organs, and unnervingly efficient circulatory system glowed in sharp detail. Carter muttered, poking at the hologram. Heart's over there. Odd. Lungs are weirdly high. What's the injury? Dalen highlighted an area on the creature's abdomen, where several jagged wounds oozed a toxic green fluid. It was injured in a territorial fight. The lacerations are infected, and its immune system is attacking its own tissues. Standard antimicrobials aren't working. Yeah, they wouldn't, Carter said, digging into his duffel. You need broad spectrum, but nothing that'll fry its liver. Got anything like cephalexin? The room fell silent. Krethal frowned. What is cephalexin? Antibiotic, Carter explained. Works wonders on mammals, reptiles, and the occasional ornery bird. We don't have that, Dalen admitted. Figures, Carter said, pulling out a vial. Good thing I packed some. Let's sedate it first. Krethal raised a limb in protest. Our strongest sedatives barely slow it down. This creature's neuroreceptors are. Carter cut him off again. Got it. High resistance. I'll improvise. He selected a massive syringe and filled it with a clear liquid, adding 2 other compounds with practiced precision. The medics recoiled as he approached the containment pod. Krethal's voice trembled. If it awakens, we will all die. Not if I time it right, Carter said. He knelt by the pod's interface, muttering to himself. With a press of a button, the pod opened, and the Yolkrin's scent flooded the room, a cocktail of musk, blood, and ozone. Carter moved swiftly, jabbing the syringe into the beast's thigh and stepping back. The Wokrin stirred, its eyes fluttering open for a split second. A low growl rumbled from its chest, shaking the floor. Then its muscles slackened, and it sank into deeper unconsciousness. "See?" Easy Carter said, wiping his brow. The medics stared, their bioluminescence dim with shock. Dalen finally spoke. What did you use?" "Ketamine and metametamodarta," replied, "plus a little something for its nerves. Now, let's clean those wounds before it wakes up." He gestured for assistance, but none of the medics moved. Rolling his eyes, Carter grabbed a scalpel, a suction device, and antiseptic gel. "Guess I'm doing this solo." Typical. As he worked, Carter narrated his actions. "Gotta get all the necrotic tissue out first. This stuff's nasty. Looks like the infection's deep, so I'll pack it with antimicrobial gel and stitch it up. Might need a drain to keep it clean." Crethall found his voice. "How can you remain so calm? You're handling a creature that could." "Eat me?" Sure, Carter said, not looking up. "But it's also a living thing in pain. My job's to help it, not freak out about what-ifs." By the time Carter finished, the Yolkrin's wounds were neatly sutured, and a slow drip of antibiotics coursed through its veins. He stepped back, hands on his hips. "There. Should heal up fine if it doesn't chew the stitches." Dalen blinked. "How? How do you know this will work?" "Don't," Carter admitted. "But it's better than doing nothing. Keep an eye on it. If it spikes a fever or stops eating, call me." As he packed up, Crethall approached cautiously. "Dr. Carter, you have defied all logic and protocol. Yet, you may have saved this creature." Carter grinned. "Not bad for a vet, huh?" He slung his bag over his shoulder and headed for the door. "Don't forget to check its stool. Always tells you more than scans." The medics watched him leave, their awe mingled with confusion. In their long careers, they had never encountered anyone quite like this strange, fearless human. The Locrin stirred a day later, its colossal form shifting uneasily within the containment pod. Its eyes flickered open, the luminous, pupil-less orbs scanning its surroundings with a predatory intensity. Dr. Crethall and Dalen stood nearby, nervously monitoring its vital signs on a glowing interface. "It's waking up," Dalen whispered, his bioluminescence fluctuating with nervous energy. Crethall grunted. "Of course it is. That human's cocktail wore off too soon. This was a disaster waiting to happen." The Locrin's growl built steadily, a subsonic rumble that made the medbay's walls tremble. Its claws flexed, scraping against the reinforced pod. The medics exchanged panicked looks as a low alarm began to chime. Before they could react further, the door slid open, and Dr. Carter strode in, holding a mug of coffee and looking alarmingly unconcerned. "Morning. How's our patient doing?" Crethall gestured frantically at the pod. "It's conscious, you fool. Do you understand what that means?" "Sure do," Carter said, setting his mug down and grabbing a data pad. He tapped a few commands, causing a faint mist to release into the pod. The Locrin's growl faltered, and it blinked drowsily. "What did you just do?" Dalen asked, his glowing veins pulsing faster. "Calmed it down," Carter replied. "It's called aromatherapy. I mixed up a little concoction of valerian root and lavender oil. Works wonders on stressed-out predators back home." Crethall's translucent skin turned a deeper shade of indigo. "You subdued a Class S predator with scented vapors." "Yep," Carter said, stepping closer to the pod. "Now let's see how it's healing." The Yolkrin's massive head turned to follow him, but its posture remained relaxed. Carter crouched near the pod's edge, peering through the transparent barrier. "Hey, big guy, feeling better?" The Yolkrin huffed, its breath fogging the glass. Carter grinned. "Yeah, you look a lot less murderous today. Let's check those stitches." Crethall watched in mute horror as Carter opened a small hatch on the pod and reached inside. The Wokrin didn't lash out instead, it sniffed his hand cautiously, then rumbled softly, a sound that could almost be mistaken for contentment. "It's responding to him," Dalen murmured. "Why isn't it attacking?" Probably because I smell like peanut butter and antiseptic, Carter said, carefully examining the stitches. Predators respect confidence too. If you act scared, they'll treat you like prey. Crethall threw up his appendages. This is lunacy. You are treating it like a domesticated pet. Nope, Carter corrected, adjusting a suture. I'm treating it like an intelligent creature that's in pain. There's a difference. Over the next several days, the Yolkrin's recovery became the talk of the peacekeeper vessel. News of the humans' unconventional methods spread quickly, drawing curious crew members to the med bay. Carter took it all in stride, patiently explaining his approach to anyone who asked. It's not about brute force or overwhelming them with tech, he told a fascinated engineer. You've got to meet them halfway. Understand their instincts and work with them, not against them. Crethall, meanwhile, remained skeptical. Your methods are reckless, he said one evening as Carter prepared another dose of antibiotics. If the Yolkrin turns violent, we'll be blamed for the deaths of this crew. Sure, Carter replied without looking up. But if we let it die, the Oran tribes might see that as an act of hostility. What's more dangerous, an angry predator or a war with its entire species? Crethall had no answer for that. The first real test of Carter's methods came a week later when the Yolkrin began to grow agitated. It paced within the pod, its claws clacking against the floor, and its growls grew more frequent. The medics quickly determined the cause, a blockage in its digestive tract. This is beyond to us, Crethall said, stepping back from the scans. The risk of surgery is high, yet Carter finished, examining the hologram. But not impossible. We just need to get creative. You mean reckless, Crethall muttered. Ignoring him, Carter began assembling his tools. We'll need to sedate it again, but this time I'm going to use a combination of physical restraints and a nerve block. The anesthesia alone might not be enough. Crethall hesitated. You truly believe you can operate on this creature? Believe? Not really, Carter admitted. But I've removed tumors from a Siberian tiger's intestines in a thunderstorm, so I like my odds. With Dalen's reluctant assistance, Carter prepped the med bay for surgery. He explained every step in detail, from sterilizing the instruments to creating a sterile field around the Yolkrin. As the operation began, the medics watched in stunned silence. Carter worked with methodical precision, his hands steady as he navigated the Yolkrin's complex anatomy. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but he remained focused, occasionally murmuring encouragement to the unconscious predator. Almost there, he said, using a specialized clamp to remove the blockage, a mass of partially digested bone and fur. Got it. Now let's close it up before it decides to wake up. After hours of intense effort, the procedure was complete. Carter stepped back, stretching his arms. That's one lucky Yolkrin. Should be good as new in a few days. Crethall approached cautiously, his expression unreadable. You may have just accomplished the impossible. Cool, Carter said, wiping his hands on a towel. Let's keep it hydrated and monitor for infection. Oh, and maybe don't feed it anything too crunchy for a while. When the Yolkrin finally recovered enough to be released, the med bay was packed with observers. Carter stood by the pod as the hatch opened, letting the predator step out onto the reinforced floor. The Yolkrin turned to face him, its glowing eyes locking onto his. For a tense moment, the room held its breath. Then, the Yolkrin lowered its massive head, letting out a low, almost purring sound. Carter grinned. Yeah, you're welcome, big guy. The Yolkrin lumbered toward the exit, pausing only to glance back at the human one last time, before disappearing into the ship's corridors. Crethall approached, his tone grudgingly respectful. I never thought I'd say this, but you've changed my perspective, Dr. Carter. Glad to hear it, Carter said, sipping his coffee. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a llama with a dental issue waiting for me back on Earth. The medics watched him go, their awe and confusion lingering. The legend of the human vet who tamed an apex predator was one they would recount for generations. The Yolkrin's release back into the wilds of its territory should have marked the end of the episode. But a few days later, the Oloran peacekeeper vessel received an urgent communique from the Oran tribes, whose emissaries requested an audience. The Orans were a proud, secretive species, rarely engaging in diplomacy unless provoked or, as it seemed in this case, deeply intrigued. Dr. Crethall stood in the command center alongside Dalen and Carter, watching the transmission unfold on the central holographic display. The Oran emissary was a towering figure with a mane of shimmering quills, their voice a deep, resonant hum. "The Yolkrin you tended has returned to our lands," the emissary said, their glowing gaze fixed on the captain of the vessel. "It bears no hostility, and its wounds have healed with miraculous speed. Explain how this was accomplished." The captain, a stoic being with an exoskeleton resembling polished stone, gestured to Carter. "This human was responsible for its care." The emissary's quills bristled slightly. "A human? These creatures are known to tame their own predators, but the Yolkrin is no terrestrial beast. This is unexpected." Carter, arms crossed and chewing on an energy bar, waved casually at the hologram. "Hi there. Name's Carter. Just doing my job." The room tensed as the emissary regarded him. "Your methods intrigue us. The Yolkrin is revered among our people as a symbol of strength and endurance. To mend such a creature, you must possess extraordinary skills or audacity." "Bit of both," Carter replied, unbothered by the imposing figure. "Your big guy was in bad shape. I just used what I know to fix it up." The emissary's tone shifted, a note of curiosity threading through their formal words. "Your knowledge is unconventional. We request that you come to our territory to share it." Crethall leaned closer to Carter. "You cannot be serious about accepting this invitation. The Oran territories are dangerous even for seasoned diplomats." Carter shrugged. "They're asking nicely. Besides, I'm curious what their other apex predators look like." 2 days later, Carter found himself aboard a sleek Oran transport vessel, accompanied by a reluctant Crethall and a fascinated Dalen. The journey through the densely packed nebula that bordered Oran space was turbulent but uneventful. When they finally arrived, Carter was struck by the planet's vibrant landscape. Massive trees with iridescent leaves stretched skyward, their roots twisting through a web of bioluminescent moss. Rivers of glowing liquid snaked across the terrain, their currents pulsing in time with some unseen rhythm. The air carried a mix of earthy and metallic scents, and the distant cries of unfamiliar creatures echoed in the distance. The Oran emissary led them to a sprawling encampment, where towering structures made of woven crystal and stone shimmered in the sunlight. At the center of the encampment was a vast enclosure, surrounded by Oran sentinels wielding weapons that hummed with latent energy. Inside the enclosure was another Yolkrin, larger than the first and clearly in distress. Its movements were sluggish, and its fur lacked the characteristic shimmer. Carter's eyes narrowed as he approached the enclosure, scanning the creature's posture and breathing. "What's wrong with it?" Dalen asked. Carter pointed to the creature's abdomen, where faint ridges bulged beneath the fur. "Looks like an obstruction. Probably something it ate that didn't agree with it. Common issue with predators, they're not picky about what they gulp down." The emissary regarded Carter with visible skepticism. "You claim this is a common issue, yet none of our healers have been able to alleviate its suffering." "Your healers aren't used to dealing with apex predators," Carter said, slipping on a pair of gloves. "Let me in there, and I'll take a look." Crethall stepped forward. "Absolutely not. This is far too dangerous. The Yolkrin." "Relax," Carter interrupted. "It's in no shape to fight, and if it does get feisty, I've got a few tricks up my sleeve." The Orans exchanged uneasy glances but eventually opened the enclosure. Carter stepped inside, moving slowly and deliberately. The Yolkrin's luminous eyes tracked him, its growl low and half-hearted. "Hey there, big guy," Carter said softly. "Let's figure out what's bothering you." With surprising gentleness, he pressed his hands against the creature's abdomen, feeling for irregularities. The Yolkrin huffed, but its posture remained docile. After a few moments, Carter nodded to himself. "Yeah, obstruction. Big one. Gonna need to flush it out." He turned to the emissary. "Got any sedatives? Something strong enough to knock it out for a while." The emissary hesitated. "We possess tranquilizers, but they are unreliable against such creatures. Figures, Carter muttered. He pulled a vial from his bag and began preparing a syringe. Good thing I came prepared. This mix should keep it under long enough to work. The Orans watched in silence as Carter administered the sedative, his calm demeanor contrasting sharply with their evident tension. Within minutes, the Wilkrin was unconscious, and Carter began the delicate process of removing the obstruction. Using a combination of tools, he worked swiftly, explaining his actions as he went. Looks like it swallowed something metallic, probably scavenged from a fight. Its digestive system couldn't break it down, so it's just been sitting here, causing all kinds of problems. When he finally extracted a jagged shard of alien metal, the Orans gasped. The shard glimmered with an otherworldly hue, its edges razor-sharp. That's what I thought, Carter said, holding it up. No wonder it was in pain. This thing's nasty. He spent the next hour cleaning and suturing the wound, ensuring the Wilkrin's vitals remained stable. When he stepped back, his gloves stained and his expression weary, the Orans erupted into murmurs of amazement. You have done what we could not, the emissary said, their tone reverent. Your knowledge surpasses our understanding of these creatures. Carter shrugged, wiping his hands on a cloth. Nah, just experience. You deal with enough big, cranky animals, you learn a thing or two. As the Wilkrin began to stir, the emissary stepped closer to Carter. Your methods are unorthodox, but your results speak for themselves. Perhaps there is wisdom in your peculiar approach. Glad you think so, Carter said, stretching his arms. Now, do you guys have anything to eat? I'm starving. The Wilkrin stirred slowly, its massive body shifting as it woke from sedation. Its glowing eyes flickered open, and it let out a low, rumbling growl that seemed more out of confusion than aggression. Carter remained still, watching its movements carefully. Easy, big guy, he said softly, holding his hands up. You're going to feel a lot better in a few hours. The Wilkrin sniffed the air, its gaze locking onto Carter. After a tense moment, it lowered its head, clearly exhausted but no longer in distress. The Orans, gathered at a safe distance, erupted into murmurs of awe. You have calmed it once again, the emissary said, stepping forward. Its suffering appears to be gone. Your skill is unparalleled. Thanks, Carter said, wiping his brow. But it's not magic. It's just understanding the problem and fixing it without making things worse. The emissary tilted their head, quills shimmering faintly. You speak as if such understanding is simple. Yet we have studied these creatures for generations and failed where you have succeeded. Maybe that's part of the problem, Carter said, stepping out of the enclosure. You study them from a distance, treat them like unsolvable puzzles. Me? I just roll up my sleeves and get to work. Animals are animals, whether they've got fangs or feathers. Crethall, who had been watching from the edge of the encampment, approached hesitantly. I must admit, Carter, your methods have proven effective. But this doesn't explain why the Wilkrin responded to you so uniquely. Carter grinned. Because I'm a human. We're apex predators too, remember? Sometimes it's just about earning their respect. The comment drew a mix of reactions, some skeptical, others thoughtful. The emissary's quills bristled slightly as they turned toward the Wilkrin, which was now lapping at a nearby stream. The Wilkrin's recovery will be seen as a powerful sign among my people, the emissary said. It will symbolize resilience and cooperation, concepts we must embrace in a galaxy as unpredictable as ours. Glad I could help, Carter said. But I've got to ask, why do you care so much about these guys? They're just predators, right? The emissary's gaze darkened slightly. They are far more than that. The Wilkrin embody our planet's primal forces. To protect them is to honor the balance of life that sustains us all. When they suffer, we suffer. Carter nodded, his expression thoughtful. Makes sense. Back on Earth, we've got species that serve as keystones for their ecosystems. Lose them, and the whole system collapses. Sounds like your Wilkrin are the same. The emissary inclined their head. Indeed, your actions here have preserved more than a single life. You've safeguarded a vital piece of our world. As the sun set over the Oran encampment, Carter found himself seated around a glowing fire pit, surrounded by Oran elders. The shimmering flames cast dancing reflections on their crystalline structures, and the air buzzed with the distant calls of nocturnal creatures. The meal served was unlike anything Carter had ever encountered, a mix of spiced roots, glowing fruit, and a broth that seemed to hum faintly with energy. He hesitated at first, but hunger won out, and he found the flavors surprisingly rich and complex. "Not bad," he said, taking another bite. "Reminds me of curry, if curry glowed in the dark." Dalen, seated beside him, leaned closer. "You truly eat with such ease. Many of these compounds are likely untested on your physiology." "Call it a leap of faith," Carter said, grinning. "Besides, humans are built to eat just about anything. Comes with being an apex omnivore." Crethall, sitting across from him, muttered something under his breath but didn't object. The Oran elders, meanwhile, seemed fascinated by Carter's casual demeanor. "You are unlike any healer we have known," one of them said, their voice a melodic hum. "You approach each challenge with a simplicity that belies its complexity." "That's just how we roll," Carter said, leaning back. "Sometimes overthinking a problem is what gets you stuck. Better to try something than sit around waiting for perfection." The emissary, seated beside the elders, nodded thoughtfully. "There is wisdom in your words, Carter. Perhaps our people have focused too much on theory and tradition, neglecting the value of action." "Hey, I'm all for tradition," Carter said, "but it's got to make room for new ideas too. Otherwise you end up with a lot of rules and no progress." The group sat in contemplative silence for a moment, the firelight reflecting in their eyes. Finally, the emissary spoke again. "Your time here has taught us much, human. We will share what we have learned from you with our healers and our people. In doing so, we hope to honor the spirit of cooperation you have shown us." Carter raised his cup of glowing broth in a mock toast. "Here's to patching up predators and making friends along the way." The Orans mirrored the gesture, their quills shimmering brightly in the firelight. As dawn broke over the Oran encampment, Carter prepared to leave. The Wilkrin, now fully recovered, watched him from a distance, its luminous eyes filled with a strange mix of recognition and respect. "Looks like it's going to be fine," Carter said, shouldering his duffel bag. "Keep an eye on it, though, and maybe don't let it snack on metal anymore." The emissary approached, their quills lowered in a gesture of gratitude. "You have our deepest thanks, Carter. Your actions have strengthened the bond between our species. Should you ever return, you will be welcomed as a friend." "Appreciate it," Carter said, shaking their hand. "But next time, maybe don't wait until things are dire to ask for help. Yeah." The emissary inclined their head. "We will remember your advice." As Carter boarded the transport vessel with Crethall and Dalen, he glanced back at the Yulkrin one last time. It let out a low, rumbling sound, something between a growl and a purr, before turning and disappearing into the wilds. "You've done something extraordinary," Carter Dalen said as the transport lifted off. "I doubt even you realize the full impact of your actions." "Probably not," Carter admitted, leaning back in his seat. "But if I've learned anything, it's that you don't have to understand everything to make a difference. Sometimes you just gotta roll up your sleeves and try." Crethall, sitting nearby, grumbled. "A philosophy as maddening as it is effective." Carter smirked. "I'll take that as a compliment." As the transport carried them away from the glowing world of the Orans, Carter stared out at the stars, a faint smile on his face. It wasn't every day you got to save a life, mend bridges between species, and earn the respect of a creature that could eat you in one bite. For a simple vet, it wasn't a bad day's work.